Hi, everyone. Welcome to Joseph's Fireside Chat series. I am Tom Dreyfus, CEO and co-founder, and thrilled to be joined by Zach Posner, Managing Director of the Legaltech Fund. Welcome, Zach.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Zach, let's just kick things off with a little bit of an intro. I'd love to learn a little bit more about you and how you ended up in legal tech.
I got here through being an entrepreneur, and you know what we love to see in our entrepreneurs is people that kind of identify problems and try to build solutions for those problems. From my end, we ended up here through through K-12 education. We had in a prior company, we had a lot of kids sensitive data, and when I say a lot, I mean close to 12 million kids sensitive data, and very few schools ever asked us about our security practices. So we ended up starting a vendor risk company to help schools. And that company quickly ended up serving law firms. And it happened when we went to form the company. Our counsel said to us, hey, forget about schools. Like, we're starting to use a lot of third-party applications, and we need to make sure that this data is held securely. And this is a decade ago now. This is 2014, 15-ish. And that company quickly pivoted to law firms, and we started to see all these challenges that law firms were having with their vendors. And we started talking to more and more of the vendors and realizing they were having challenges, not only selling into law firms, but also just with like the funding environment. Like, there were very few funders that understood, the difference between a contingency law firm and a corporate law firm and how different they can be and how different the go-to-market motions are. And we just said, hey, this was just, we had started making some angel investments. And then over the course of, 5 or 6 years, eventually we said, hey, we saw the opportunity, and we planted a flag in the ground. So we're going to be the first dedicated fund just to this vertical.
Which is such a great story. And I feel like the way that this has played out, the Legal Tech Fund is this, pioneering force in legal specific venture capital. I think that for us at Josef, one of the reflections that we have on this moment is that it feels different. Right now feels different to the past 2, 3, 4, 5 years. Is that a feeling that you share? Is this moment that we're in different?
Absolutely. So we thought there were fundamental challenges, and kind of opportunities, I should say, to bring software into the legal vertical. Joseph, you guys were an early investment that we think is solving some of these workflow issues. And we still think that there's an extraordinary amount of workflow issues out there to be solved. But the real kicker was November, directionally 20th of 2022, when the ChatGPT demo came out. And I think that what happened was the demo was so simple and it was so easy to understand that every person that saw the demo could understand the impact that it could have. And very specifically to, industries that use words, that's what the clearest, words is their weapon, or industries that are based upon reading and writing. And, I think that followed. So first off, everybody was able to see that with their own eyes, and they could understand that no matter, what generation you grew up with, you saw it, you got it. The second thing that happened was probably, I'm guessing 60 days later, Goldman Sachs came out with a report, and it said that of all verticals, effectively legal is the most susceptible to AI. And I think the number they used was 44% of all legal work is susceptible to AI. So what happened from that point forward was, this used to be a space where folks like us would be here, and that kind of brought this to the attention of every venture fund in the world. So I would say from that point forward, we were almost like, we've almost turned into like the popular kids.
Mm-hmm.
And where we had every generalist fund that historically overlooked legal, and that was like, that's the opportunity that we saw, that are now all over legal. Now, that being said, it's very different being all over legal with 3% of your time versus all over legal with 100% of your time. And if you're going to ask me how is this going to play out, I think there's a lot of capital coming into this space, and we've seen little waves of this before, and it usually doesn't end well. And I think that we're probably going to be in a situation like that again. But that being said, generative AI, LLMs are going to produce some amazing companies, we think that there's an opportunity not only for new companies, but for existing companies to come out with amazing products. And they actually may be better positioned over the next 6 months or a year to go capture market share. And not to turn this back to you, but I think you're seeing that with some of, what you guys are doing with Joseph Q. How you had an amazing workflow product and you said, hey, we can add a layer of, we can think about how we add generative AI to this. And now all of a sudden, all eyes are turning to you guys.
It is kind of fun being one of the popular kids. I'm not gonna lie. Um, One of the things you just said is interesting, though. I think the amount of funding that is flowing into the sector is obviously different by the numbers, but it is a different feeling. We're on the receiving end of a level of interest from venture capital that is a bit new, to be honest. Um, where do you think we are in that hype cycle? And I don't just mean that from an investment perspective, I mean it from a customer perspective. Are lawyers, are they ready? Are they buying? Are they experimenting? What are they doing in this cycle right now?
I'm going to bifurcate this into two sets of companies. Ones that are Gen AI first and everything they do, and kind of came out in the last year. And then, I'm going to put you guys, who's been like what I would call like an early adopter transitioning to Gen AI. I think the hype cycle, Bill Gates has a famous quote: people overestimate what happens in 1 year, they underestimate what happens in 10. And I think that's where we are for that first bucket. And I think we're seeing a lot of hype for AI first companies, specifically in the vertical of legal, versus companies that are using this and they're layering it onto their existing products that we already know are secure and they work and there's use cases. And I would say maybe LLMs are a little bit of an accelerator to the work they're doing. We're seeing companies like yours, like just plow forward and, and you're not watching two people at a customer experiment with it. You're watching everybody transitioning using this software every day, all day. So, I think it's clearly bifurcated, and I think that we're early. I think a lot of what you're seeing now is going to kind of flush out. A lot of money was tossed in. Oh my God, we're going to go into legal and throw some AI at it, and it's going to be amazing,
Hmm.
without understanding the vertical. And I think all of that is going to flush out in the next year or two. And then I think you'll start seeing some companies really build meaningful things versus the stuff that you're doing versus some of the stuff that we've been interacting with companies for the past couple of years, and we're watching this just be an absolute accelerant to both sales, but also more importantly, in client engagement.
That all makes sense, especially on the company building side of things. Being able to bring the experience that you have with your customers, with the different segments within the legal industry, helps you to identify the right use cases for Gen AI. What about on the user side? I mean, I know you spend a lot of your time fielding calls from GCs and heads of innovation about how they should approach, this moment. What's the feeling that you're getting from them? Are they diving in head first? Are they taking a cautious approach? Where are they up to?
So I think it's a cautious approach on the user side. Again, I'm going to bifurcate these constructs for saying, hey, there's AI first that are just coming out and saying our software secures everything and solves everything. And I think there's some barriers. There was a barrier 6 months ago where the malpractice insurer for the big law firm sent a letter out, said, if you use AI, we're not insuring you. So what we've seen for that first bucket is a lot of experimentation. And, we're seeing 2, 3, 4 members of a law firm within a legal group experimenting and playing with it with fake data, um, versus the existing workflow products that are already embedded in that. We're seeing much more day-to-day usage, I would call.
Hmm. And where do you think they get to in 6 months, 12 months, 5 years? Is this a flash in the pan, or is this something that has fundamentally changed the way the legal industry operates and we're never turning back?
Fundamentally change the way the legal industry operates, never turning back. I like it a lot better for the things that focus on the lower end work, where things are clear. Like, if you ask generative AI, and just timing, we're sitting here in April of 2024. So obviously everything's going to change as these models get better. But when you ask generative AI right now, an open question, I would trust it 60% of times. When you ask it a question, when you say summarize a document, I'd give it a 99 and a decimal. When you can build finite walls around it, I think it becomes a lot better. Over time, our friend Dan Katz gave ChatGPT the bar exam in 2020, in Q1 of 23, I believe, with GPT 3.5. It's or 3.5. It scored a 46%, and then it scored a 76% in Q2 with 4. So when 5 comes out, you can start wondering where that goes. So I think there's a matter. Again, I go back to that Bill Gates quote and say, overestimate 1 year, underestimate 10. And by the way, this ain't 10. This is 3 to 4 years. So I think you're about to see a wave of this stuff in the next year or two, kind of really be meaningful. And I don't think we're putting it back in the bag.
Yeah. Okay, last question for you, and then we'll wrap things up. I mean, clearly you remain bullish about the impact technology is going to have on the legal industry. It's what you do. Why do you do it? Why do you care about technology in the legal industry?
So I would say 2 reasons. One, at the highest level, people don't, you wouldn't correlate this. Everything I've done in my career has been in impact oriented industries and saying, how do you use software to improve outcomes and kind of improve the world a little bit? It was much more clear 15 years ago when I was working in K-12 education or energy and energy analytics to save buildings energy. But look, all of this technology, all that we're doing is increasing access to legal services. And I bifurcate that from access to justice because that's all another bucket that I know you think about deeply. But for us, it's just if this technology is the difference between an entrepreneur starting their company because they don't need to pay a law firm thousands of dollars to incorporate versus not, like these little things actually matter. So I think high level, we don't talk about this as an impact fund. We never, we don't measure the impact, but like every single thing that we're doing is trying to just increase access to legal services for more people. There's all these stats, 70% of people have a legal claim that never goes met. So we think that's important. And then personally, I've run a couple startups. I've personally invested in quite a few, and then the fund, we're up to 56 companies right now. I've made every mistake you can possibly make. So if we can help an entrepreneur from banging their head against the wall, and if we can, I've learned through other experiences the power of a vertically focused fund. And if we can just help connect the dots for these entrepreneurs sooner rather than later, we can really accelerate their work, help them reach their full potential, and more importantly, like lift up an entire community. And if we can do that, I think good things are going to happen all around.
Well, I can definitely say that as the founder of one of the companies in your portfolio, we have experienced some pretty deep alignment on both of those things, both in terms of the help that you've given us and also on our shared mission to improve access to legal services. Thank you so much for joining me. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, Zach.